So today I've got a little bit of a rendering job in this absolutely stunning house. Beautiful day as well, sun shining. So I'm just tapping on the wall to see where the area that's blown needs doing. So I can hear it's solid and you can hear it's hollow. All of it obviously has to come off, you can see the crack. Tools, I've got them all out ready, dust sheeted as well. My mixer there, and I've got my breaker, I've got some SPR. First thing I'm going to have to do is score a line and draw with my straight edge the area that I'm going to be removing. I'm placing a couple of rubble sacks down there so I can catch the render, and you'll see why a little bit later on. So I've got my breaker out, starting to remove the rendering. As you can see, it's just coming off really, really easily. But that sand that's left, that's going to have to come off as well. And the problem with this mix was it was too weak, very, very sandy mix, as you can see, and that's probably the reason why it's blown. Plus, the original first coat was very, very hard, but they didn't scratch it, which is another reason why it's probably blown. So all the loose render I'm bobbing into a Gorilla tub. That way I know exactly how much sand and cement I need to mix to replace. Just going to take the rest of that loose sand off with my breaker. So I'm left with the original scratch coat, which wasn't scratched. You've got to scratch your surfaces before you put your top coat on, otherwise there's a really good chance that it will blow, which it did in this case. So I'm scratching it off. Then I'm going to give it a coat of SPR, which is a waterproof sealer, so there's no chance of water penetrating through that wall. So I can see how much amount of render I've actually removed, which means I can gauge pretty much exactly how much render I need to replace. So what ratio am I going to use here for my sand and cement mix? I'm going to go for a 4:1. 4 parts sand, and that's plastering sand, and 1 part cement. And I'm going to mix it dry. I always mix it dry first, make sure I've got a good consistency. I don't want any sandy areas. Same again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 part cement. Checking my SPR wall now. That SPR is pretty much dry, or a little bit tacky, so that is good to go. I've created a little well in my sand and cement mix, and I'm going to pour some water in, and I'm just going to knock this up by hand first, then finish with my mixer. I'm going to add a little bit of SBR to that mix as well, and I'm going to add some plasticizer, and that's going to make it a little bit more like a plaster rather than a sand and cement mix, which makes it easier to work with. I'm just working left to right, spreading up into my surface, pulling across. I'm spreading this roughly 5mm thick. My main plastering stroke, whenever I'm spreading plaster, is always an upward one for me, and then I'll cut across as well. So I'm doing up and across, up and across. So how do I actually spread plaster or sand and cement render properly? Well, if you watch this slowly, I'm actually rolling my trowel closed as I push upwards. I'm getting plenty on my trowel and then closing the trowel as I push up, that, which means I'm rolling plaster onto the surface. I'm also overlapping my last stroke with half of what's on the trowel. Then take the overlap out, spread in half, take the overlap out. I'm also using the original surface as a guide right there. I'm scraping my render to the original depth of that top rendered original surface. So I'm spreading up and I want to make sure it's the same level, so I'm cutting across there, just taking off so that I know that that render is the same depth as the original. Just bobbing a bit more on the first area that I started. I've noticed it's a little bit shallow, so bobbing a little bit more on just so that it is the same depth as that left hand side bead. So because there's a scratch coat under there, that's the only coat I'm going to be applying on this one. I've just got to let that firm up a little bit and then I can float it off with a sponge. I'm going to check it as well before I decide to leave it. I'm just using my straight as a quick guide just to check for any shallow spots that might be there, but that's looking pretty good. So I'm happy with it, happy to leave that to firm up a little bit before I float it. So I'm cleaning my gear down now, and then I can have a bit of a break before I float that wall off. So I've left it for a good hour and a half to firm up a little bit, and to be honest it still is quite wet. But I'm just going to lightly float it. I'm just rubbing it with a nice soft sponge just to even things up a little bit and give it a bit of a textured look. I'm trying to match the original render, which has a bit of a textured look. So just little circular motions, nice and light. I'm not putting any pressure on there. I don't want to disturb what I've done. Matching render to the original can be quite tricky, so I'm being really careful not to take too much back out. I'm wanting this to finish exactly the same depth as the original, so when it's painted we're not going to be able to see it. So I'm going to check it with my trowel once I've finished. I'm going to put my trowel up against it, up against the original, and just make sure I've got a seamless depth. That's how I patch with sand and cement render. If you got something out of this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. It helps the channel. Thanks for watching, guys.